George E. Waring Jr. in 1890 said, "No surer index of the degree of civilization of a community than the manner in which it treats its organic wastes." Hi, my name is Bill Beardsley. As we will see, trash, solid waste, or garbage is a problem that has been with human beings since the very beginning of time, but has changed in character in only the last 100 years. Also, the attitudes of Americans have changed in the last 50 years. It has only been in the last 20 years that people have felt that mankind is endangered by a crisis of planetary proportions for the first time in the history of the world. And yet, as Paul Ehrlich has said, the trouble with almost all environmental problems is that by the time we have enough evidence to convince people, you're dead. Because of one of the basic laws of physics, the law of conservation of matter, you can only change something into something else, but you can never destroy it. So, there are only two ways of disposing of our trash. Either dump it, or recycle, reduce, and reuse it. The 3 R's of trash go back only a few years, and yet recycling, reduction, and reuse are words that are being heard in every town and city in every state and country, and indeed at all levels of all governments. In the small city of Melrose, located 7 miles north of Boston, recycling is catching on and getting bigger. What started off as a small operation in the back of a tractor-trailer collecting newspapers soon grew to involve garbage trucks, a front-end loader, 5 tractor-trailers, and approximately 100 people a month. And now, curbside recycling is being utilized in Melrose with some monthly collection of various materials as well. But what are the roots of recycling? Where did it begin? Everybody knows they recycled back in the good old days, but why did it stop? This is what we're going to investigate in this show. I think you will see that we have stopped because we were asked to stop by big business, the government, and of course, by ourselves, because we wanted something new, bright, and shiny. And we wanted to throw away the old objects and the old ways, and move on to new things and modern ways. Well, let's get an idea of the problem. We generated 160 million tons of trash per year here in the United States in the late 1980s. That would be a pile 30 stories high on 1,000 football fields. Or it would make a bumper-to-bumper convoy of 63,000 garbage trucks whose total length is 1/2 the distance to the moon. Or every 5 years, each American discards directly and indirectly the weight of the Statue of Liberty. Here in America, we throw away enough iron and steel each year to supply all of the nation's car makers. 2.5 million plastic bottles are thrown away each hour. We could rebuild the entire United States commercial air fleet every 2 weeks with the aluminum disposed. The original recycling was due to composting. As the dead animals and plants settled to the bottom of the world's oceans, they decomposed into their original components to be reused by other plants and animals. Living plants and animals were recycled by being eaten by other plants and animals. Life was rough. Of the 500 million species that ever lived on this planet, 498 million are now extinct. Also, most species of mammals do not survive longer than 600,000 years. Man has already survived for over 1 million years. This was the original landfill that could have been here in Melrose 12,000 years ago. The people were simple, and their methods were even more simple. Waste was simply thrown away right outside their living quarters. Cavemen and early Indians threw away more per person than even modern man. But of course it was all biodegradable. Everything was thrown there, anything of no use, including dead people. As the piles became higher, it attracted other carnivorous animals, which led the people to move to another area. But somewhere along the line, one of the smarter than normal humans noticed that plants grew much taller and fuller than on the more barren ground. Thus the first compost heap was born. This fact was used by the early agricultural societies. The earliest record of composting is on clay tablets from the Akkadian Empire in the Mesopotamian region 1,000 years before Moses. Composting is even mentioned in the Bible and the Talmud in numerous passages. In 500 BC Athens, the problem of trash was starting to raise its ugly head in an urban setting. One of the first recorded edicts ever found concerned trash, stating that no more garbage can be thrown in the streets. The early Athenians located their landfills downwind a measured mile from the city, and they had scavengers poring over the scraps, recycling, and reusing. An old Iroquois saying is, "The earth is our mother, and we cannot sell our mother." The Pawtucket Indians lived here in what would later be known as Melrose. There were not many Indians here or anywhere else in New England. It is estimated that there were only between 25,000 to 75,000 Indians in all of New England, 1 to 3 times as many residents as in Melrose today. But theirs was a relatively simple life because they learned to live with nature and not fight it. They had no metals except for a little copper for their ornaments. They had no wheels because they had no need for them. They valued their liberty above all else and neither coveted riches nor dread poverty. They learned to grow foods. They learned about crop rotation to preserve the nutrients in the ground. They learned to preserve foods. They learned to burn down the undergrowth in the forests so the animals could graze. They learned to burn down the fields so the fire would reinfuse the earth with needed nutrients. They learned to use fish as a direct fertilizer on their main crop, maize or corn. But up to 80% of the Indians died by 1625 because when the white man came from Europe, he brought the rat, an unknown mammal here, and brought the bubonic plague and smallpox and other diseases. The early settlers of Pond Field, or Melrose, in the mid to late 1600s were more concerned with surviving than trash disposal. Even though Europeans had been in North America for over 150 years, the first iron cooking utensil was not made until 1642, right next door to Melrose in Saugus. Most items necessary for surviving were imported from Europe, made crudely, or, was more often the case, done without. So things were made to last and handed down for generations, not for sentimental reasons, but out of necessity. But with more permanent settlements, there were more permanent dumps. With the number of residents being very small in Melrose, around 10 families, the landfills were, for all intents and purposes, inconsequential. Ben Franklin in Philadelphia was the first in the United States to arrange for garbage pickup. In 1792, he had 60,000 slaves wading into the Delaware River as far as they could with baskets full of garbage and dump their loads. When Thomas Jefferson designed Monticello, he planned underground conveyor belts with buckets for garbage to be moved as far as possible from the house. Melrose is becoming more established now in the early to middle 1800s. More people are moving here and setting up permanent residence. However, trash dumps are personal issues only and easily swept under the rug. Few things were thrown away. In his book on the history of Melrose, written by Levi Gould in 1901, comes the following paragraph concerning clothes around 1780. The style of living in the rural districts of New England was exceedingly homely and plain. In general, old and young were furnished with their Sunday suit of clothes, made so faithfully and of such substantial materials, supplied by the spinning wheels and looms of the domestic factory, and preserved with such pious economy as to last for a lifetime and descend to children's children. Few men expected to live long enough after attaining their majority to wear out a pair of boots whose leather had been 9 years in tanning. However, things were thrown away. Modern archaeologists can now use a foolproof technique to pinpoint the location of windows and doors of colonial houses where nothing but foundations remain. They just look for heaps of trash that were thrown there. Things were starting to change. In 1842 England, a report came out linking disease with filthy environmental conditions. The age of sanitation had begun. And then we get to the Victorian Age, which is that period of time between the Civil War and World War I. It was definitely the most active period of time in terms of change than any other of man's existence. Every aspect of living changed forever during this period. Style of homes, housekeeping, cooking different foods, leisure time, rules of society, the way businesses were run, technology, science, and the working hours for people, which were reduced from up to 14 and even 16 hours per day down to, in some cases, 8 hours per day. America was, and still is, unique in the world in two different aspects which helped account for the huge changes occurring during this time. One, we are blessed with huge amounts of resources, which at the time of the Victorian Age was to a very large degree untouched. And two, we were a melting pot of humanity. We had no old ways, no old country customs to get in the way of advancement. People came to this country from all over the world, so cultural differences had to be suppressed in dealing with each other. And they came to this country for a better life, one that they could help put in motion. When the train became not only popular, but built to provide transportation from the suburbs to the city, an explosion of growth took place. A huge exodus from the city to the suburbs, a new concept. Places like Melrose went from a total of 125 dwellings in 1850 to 3,237 in 1900 because a commuter train line was finished in 1846, giving people a way to work in Boston but live in suburbia. That means over one house a week was built for 50 years. One of the very few aspects of living, however, that did not change was that of recycling, reuse, and reduction. Most food that was obtained was bought in bulk, whether in a city, a town, or in the country. Bushel baskets of potatoes, 50-pound bags of flour and sugar. There is not much in the way of pre-packaged or pre-prepared foods, so these were not an option for consumers. Meat had to either be bought almost daily due to spoilage from no refrigeration, or people slaughtered their own livestock and saved it by smoking or salting it. The rag picker and other scavengers came around to all the houses in suburban towns like Melrose to collect these scraps for recycling, to be made into high-quality paper. Most of the refuse that was produced was either ashes from the coal or wood from the fires needed to cook or warm the house, and food scraps. Both of these items could easily go into a compost pile, which most people had in a suburban town or in a rural area. Things like glass bottles were recycled. At Kiley Farms, one of 18 local milk farms, the glass bottles were just washed and refilled, caps put on, and delivered again. It was the same for soda pop. The problem of trash, however, was being felt in the urban setting. Big cities like Boston had a problem with all the manure left in the streets from all of the horses, and people had no real good place to throw away their junk, including broken furniture, paper, and foodstuffs. Men in their wagons still came around and collected rags, glass, and all metals, and a farmer could usually be found to pick up the food scraps. and old furniture and papers could be burned in either the kitchen fire or the central heat furnace. But due to the increase in population and dwellings, it soon became too much to keep up with. Most cities allowed and even encouraged pigs and dogs to roam free in the streets to eat what they could of the wastes because people just threw these food scraps and bodily waste out the window to the streets below. In New York, there were reports that up to 3 feet of manure and trash were thrown on some streets. In Boston, there were 7,780 horses just for the trolley company alone. This is where city government came into the picture, with the germ theory of disease becoming more and more accepted, and with less trash picked up by vendors, and with more and more horses leaving their gifts in the streets. Something had to be done. This is when street sewers, water pipes, gas pipes, and trash collection became a necessity and not just a luxury. In New York in 1890, a recycling plant was started for sorting the trash for recycling. Also, crushing the garbage for recovering the oils and fats was tried, but was stopped due to the odors. The grease and oils were sold for 3 to 10 cents per pound, then made into soap, candles, and perfume. The residuum was then sold for between 5 and 10 cents per pound to be used as a fertilizer. In 1880, fewer than 1 in 4 cities had a way of systematically removing the rubbish. 30 years later, in 1910, 8 of 10 did. Even though there were many useful inventions during this time that changed life, many different inventions were tried to alleviate the problem of trash, but none were very effective. During World War I and the Great Depression, people's thoughts went back to surviving, not lofty thoughts about their trash. However, the street sewer pipes and city water pipes were decreasing the amount of disease, and in 1934 it became illegal to dump into the world's oceans. But certain industrial and commercial businesses were exempted. The Great Flu epidemic during World War I convinced almost everybody that the germ theory was no longer just a theory, and again, with the depressed economy, everybody recycled, reused, or reduced in every aspect of life. The urban population was becoming bigger too. By 1920, it was over 50% of the U.S. population. Here in Melrose, the town had to do something because everybody was running out of room in their backyards for their trash piles, especially for food scraps and ashes. So here, they had a contract with pig farms in Woburn and Saugus to collect the food scraps once a week in the winter and twice in the summer. Here at this dump by L Pond in the middle of the city, the ashes and trash, such as glass and tin cans, were either brought down by the townsfolk themselves, or they could hire someone to do it for them. World War II is usually seen as the high point of recycling, but it must be remembered why the government wanted the citizens to recycle. So things could be made into bullets, tanks, guns, bombs, and airplanes, things that were destroyed by the act of war. Melrose contributed 6,380 pounds of aluminum for the war effort. Paper was recycled at a rate approaching 50%, and the waste stream in total was estimated to be recycled at 25%. By today's standards, it's amazing what was encouraged to reuse back then.
The war against the Japs increases in fury. Our fighting men must have more and more precious supplies. We can help meet this urgent need by saving waste kitchen fats. 1 pound will help make 150 machine gun bullets. So keep saving all your used fats and turn them over to your butcher.
But the citizens did reduce, recycle, and reuse, but they had to do it to such a large degree that at the war's end, the citizens and the people coming back from the different war theaters wanted nothing to do with anything that remotely had to do with anything from the war. Therefore, no recycling, no reusing, and no reducing. especially no reducing. At the end of World War II, the most economical way of disposing of this waste were by a sanitary landfill, which is of course an oxymoron. And the government, with the war just ending, had to keep with the most economical way of disposing of trash. There are too many other things to worry about, like a nuclear war. During the 50s, the Cold War with Russia and then China reached scary proportions. Trash removal was not seen as a high priority indeed. Landfills were seen as a way of reclaiming old worthless lands like swamps, wetlands, and other undesirable areas, which, of course, kill these an important breeding and feeding grounds for many unique plants and animals, which led to their death as well. This was the era of big business and big government knowing what was best for Americans. The Cold War was in full swing with the Red Menace dominating news. Nobody could question anything. Technology was seen as good. The old was thrown out and destroyed. Everybody was trying to think of the future. The itinerant peddler, like the local knife sharpener, going around Melrose in his Jeep, and the local shoe cobbler on the corner of Grove and Lebanon, who resold shoes, were disappearing. But this was also the start of the era of toxic waste and nuclear waste. People were moving out of the city into the suburbs, into supposed utopia and safety again. Most homeowners just burned their trash in their own backyard, eliminating the problem, or so they thought. The battle cry in the 50s was to consume, consume, consume. A letter written in the New York Journal of Retailing during this time by Victor Liebow said, "Our enormously productive economy demands that we make consumption a way of life, that we convert the buying and use of goods into rituals, that we seek our spiritual satisfaction in consumption. We need things consumed, burned up, worn out, and replaced, and discarded at an ever-increasing rate." And America listened. We made rituals of going to the supermarket, first seen during the Victorian Age, and the hardware store, the lumber store, car dealerships, and the fast food store, and bought pre-mixed, pre-packaged, almost pre-digested everything that was designed not to work too long so we would buy more. And Melrose, like the rest of the country, heeded the call and consumed. The problem was the dumps would too quickly become too small for all the waste. So Melrose contracted out to have somebody at the dump and to have a fire there when they thought there was enough stuff to burn. So all the paper, packaging, foodstuffs, wood, and clothes and tin were brought down here to Pine Banks to be burned and then buried. The last of the ragmen stopped pushing their cart by the end of the 50s. In 1956, the first citywide trash collection was started by the city. It was also around 1956 that the city bought Spencer Farms at Trimount on Route 99 to be used as a dump.
How well could you survive a nuclear war? Facts prove you can survive even the worst attack if you are prepared. All you need is a well-planned survival program, a shelter equipped with all necessary survival items, but most important of all, stocked with survival rations. This emergency life pack food kit, available in various sizes, contains emergency food and drinking water for one person for 8 or 16 days. These life pack kits are the finest on the market without exception. The water is absolutely sterile and vacuum packed to meet U.S. government and Coast Guard specifications and has a guaranteed shelf life of 25 years. The food has a shelf life of 5 years. Fact is, a shelter without life pack kits is just not properly equipped. Even without shelter, you must have food and water for survival. For full details and easy terms...
And then another war came in the late 60s and 70s, but this war was different. For the first time, the youth of America questioned their elders. Trust in the government at all levels, local to national, fell with the nefarious behavior of a few elected officials. People were shaken awake from their dreams, courtesy of the Vietnam War, the marches to Washington, the Black Pride movement, and other problems with America which was previously ignored. The plastic society's trust in big business and government plummeted. Everything being handled by government anywhere was being questioned, and the truth was coming out. No longer were issues looked at strictly through rose-colored glasses. Nuclear waste, communism, foreign affairs, the illegal shenanigans of the CIA and FBI, race riots were shaking up society at all levels, and nobody knew where to turn. Protest became the norm, and questioning all behaviors of all governments became the in thing to do. But people were waking up to environmental concerns. The world was no longer seen as a place where anything would always be available just for the work of digging it out of the ground. Nor would things disappear just because you put them in the ground. A lot of the problem was perception. A quote taken from the book Waste Watcher is, "One of the best ways to encourage people to produce garbage at home is to take it away from them as fast as they accumulate it. For if you don't see the results of living wastefully, and you will not, because for the most part the garbage mountain is discreetly hidden from the public gaze, you will not be troubled by the rate at which you produce waste." The waste collection service that most of us enjoy doesn't just take garbage away, it creates more of it. And studies were done that proves that people will throw things away based on the size of their trash cans. So the bigger the trash can, the more trash people throw away. People were running out of options. Landfills were filling up. Resco, a part of General Electric at the time, contracted with local towns and cities just north of Boston, including Melrose, to take away their garbage and burn it. It originally cost Melrose $7 per ton. Resco burned it to generate the energy needed in their manufacturing plants. The average citizen saw Resco in the 80s as too expensive. The price jumped up to $65 per ton. But Resco was required to charge this because they were required to install very expensive smokestack scrubbers to collect all the toxic fumes. And yet, when they first started, they were seen as a savior, even being written up in National Geographic as the wave of the future. Besides the price, burned refuse only produces half the energy of coal and one-third the energy of oil, and it leaves a lot of toxic waste in the form of ashes. But it does reduce the mass 95%. So what was to happen? The government at this time was reactive, not proactive. They were too shell-shocked by all of the events to do anything. Recycling was being started in different communities by grassroots citizens, not the government. In Melrose, the local League of Women Voters studied the problem of solid waste in a year-long process. A grassroots recycling committee was the end result, with two women, Linda Menezes and Gail Wagner, as co-chairs. Gail Wagner was just another citizen who became concerned about raising her two daughters in an environment that she knew was becoming more and more contaminated. She knew how to motivate people and was well organized. It all started with tractor trailers at the parking lot at the high school with newspapers. When a second truck had to be consistently used, the city government stepped in and helped. What the large recycling committee worked for and achieved was curbside recycling. It started with newspapers and eventually was enlarged to include magazines, plastic bottles, glass, and tin. Linda Menezes had taken over the recycling committee by this time. She later became an alderman from Ward 4 and championed the cause, leading to more items that could be recycled. For instance, yard waste, which the state legislature made into a law that grass clippings, twigs, and branches could no longer be put in the trash. Also, as a side note, no longer could the Christmas trees be collected, brought down here to Elk Pond by the Boy Scouts onto the ice in January for a large bonfire. So citizens can come down here to City Yard and drop off their leaves and their yard waste, where the city will collect them and take them to the city's compost pile, where all this is converted back into rich loam to be used by the city's citizens free of charge. There are many people who helped make all of this possible, from 3 mayors' administrations and their appointed officials to average citizens who helped out, became involved, talked with their neighbors, and their elected officials. And this time things were done differently as compared to other programs in other cities and towns in the 70s. People were hoping back then that all one had to do was collect and sort the stuff, that it could easily be recycled. The truth was, it couldn't. Just like World War II, when a large percentage of recycled stuff had to be landfilled, it was happening again in the 70s. There was not enough demand for the materials because the businesses were not geared up to deal with it all. The price for newspapers being recycled went from $45 per ton to minus $25 per ton. Groups had to pay to take the paper away due to the glut of paper. This time, people made sure that there would be a continuous need for papers, and manufacturers geared up and were ready. A curious side note to the story of recycling was a large reason for the gearing up of industry for recycling in this country. In the 1960s, there was casual littering being done by everybody from their car windows, driving down the then new superhighways and streets. Lady Bird Johnson, the president's wife, is credited in helping change this with the Litterbug campaign. It became a sense of aesthetics and pride to have a clean environment. It has been very effective compared to our environment back then. A study has shown that there is a critical size for a litterbug, 4 inches. Anything larger than this is saved and thrown away appropriately. Anything smaller has the potential to land in the grass or water somewhere. And now we have come full circle, dust to dust, sort of. Have we achieved our goals? Can we now rest on our laurels? No, of course not. Let's look at these. The average lifespan of one of these bags is 1 or 2 hours. We fill them, we take them home, and we empty them as soon as we do get home, and then we throw them away. Tin is one big exception in this country. 91% of it has to be imported, making it very important to recycle this expensive commodity. Luckily, there is only a thin coat of tin on the average can. The rest is steel. Out of 1 ton of metal cans, there is only 6 pounds of pure tin. The U.S. discards 200 million tons of these cans per year. 1 billion trees are cut down to make 16 billion disposable diapers, none of which, presumably, are recycled. But as Irma Baumbach has said, as a mother, I'd rather do away with foam cups and have hot coffee poured into both my hands and drink fast than do away with disposable diapers. It takes about one half this size can to make enough aluminum from ore to produce this, but only 5% of that same oil to recycle it. Recycling 1 aluminum can will save enough energy to run a television set for over 3 hours. 1.6 billion of these things are disposed of each year. The Boston Globe uses about 2.5 million trees, or 143,000 tons of newsprint per year to print this. For each ton recycled, this would save 17 trees, 7,000 gallons of water, and enough energy to heat 6 average-sized houses in Vermont for 1 full winter. The local newspaper, the Melrose Free Press, uses 1.1 tons of paper, on average, per week, which is 100 trees per year. They changed the width of the paper from 27 inches to 25 inches in 1999, which saves 4 tons of paper per year. Polyethylene was invented in 1942 by Earl S. Tupper right here in Massachusetts. One problem with the material is that it burns at such a high temperature it melts the metal grates. But the bigger problem with it is when mixed with salt and bleach and then burned, it creates dioxin. It only takes 3 ounces of dioxin in Lake Ontario to adversely affect all the seagulls' eggs nesting there. Another name for polyethylene? Tupperware. There are 2 billion razors thrown away in this country per year. And this brings us to packaging. The reason for all this packaging is simple. 1, it is to entice us to buy it. 2, it gives us important information. And 3, it helps people from just walking out of the store with it. The problem is 50% of the volume and 30% of the weight of waste is for all this packaging. The good news is businesses are not stupid. They know this and they are trying to take steps to reduce the size and thickness of this packaging. If graphed out over time, there is almost a straight line going down for the weight and volume of this packaging. There are 2 differences between the waste we generate now as compared to 100 years ago, and this is one of the 2, toxic wastes. These soaps, pesticides, cleaners, styrofoam, and car fluids such as oil and antifreeze is deadly to our environment when just haphazardly thrown about. This includes mercury-containing products such as mercury thermometers, mercury thermostats, batteries, fluorescent tubes and TVs, and computer monitors. In the U.S., each citizen throws away around 12 pounds of these hazardous materials per year. I wish it was as easy as saying that this paper cup is much better for the environment than this styrofoam cup, but unfortunately, I can't. While a paper is made mostly of paper, there is wax, ink, and other plastics to be removed before recycling. And even though the styrofoam is made principally of hydrocarbons, oil, once it is landfilled, it stays inert. There are some studies that show there is less polluting of air and water making and disposing of styrofoam as compared to recycling paper, which has to be de-inked, bleached, ground up, and then remade into paper again. There are now archaeologists who spend their time looking at landfills from the 40s, 50s, as well as the present day to study the throwing away behavior of people. It is very easy to date a landfill because when they come across a piece of paper, they just look at the date on it. There is, in fact, very little decomposition going on in the majority of landfills. Another fact that has come out of the research of trash habits of American society is that the two largest materials in landfills, with nothing else coming even close to the growth exhibited by these two, are paper and construction debris, whether it is tearing down an existing structure or improving on an existing one. The paper is obviously from the computer boom, that invention that would make paper obsolete. Do I want to go back to the days of the rag picker and metal man coming around in a horse-drawn wagon? No. Do I want to mimic third world countries that have such a poor class of people, like in Mexico and India, Thailand, and the Philippines, Colombia, or Egypt, that scavenge the garbage heaps looking for things to recycle or even to eat? No. I want to mimic a place like this in the small community of Eastham on Cape Cod, who has a population in the winter of 5,500 people. People bring their garbage here, which makes it rather obvious how much is generated. Over here, people recycle glass, and here, plastic. Back here is where branches, leaves, and grass is thrown to be composted. And here, metal goods are placed, and even though people are not encouraged to take things away, it happens. And in this barn, people can place books, kitchen supplies, baby items, and other things to be taken away by anybody, anytime. Places like this, even though not common, happen everywhere. Going back to the old days, things were bought and sold either in bulk or like this, at a farmer's market, open-air stalls, where most people bring their own ways of carrying their purchases home. The bigger cities have bigger problems. You cannot expect the people there to come to an area and throw away their trash. And it would be intolerable to have many local transfer stations, one in each neighborhood. So what to do? The only answer that has found any credence is this. Either weigh each bag of trash or count each bag of trash and have the owner pay for anything over a certain base amount. The best seems to be counting bags, allowing so many, then charge a small price, say $1 per bag, over the number allowed. This idea is endorsed by the Environmental Protection Agency and is being done by many communities across the nation. It must be remembered that volunteer recycling committees and local governments want recycling, reduction, and reuse to happen. They want to make it as easy as possible to use and as cheap as possible to use. The problems are this. 1, there will always be trash. 2, there will always be the need for a landfill for that trash, even after all of the recyclables are removed. Hopefully it will be kept to a minimum, but there will always be some to be disposed of. Even if the trash is burned, there will still be the ashes that need to be landfilled. And yes, there might be uses for that land where landfills are located, such as under this building, but only if the landfill was created safely in the first place by controlling the toxic runoff of all the oils, heavy metals, and other poisons to the environment. In 1991, the federal government made it mandatory that any new landfills built cannot pollute the ground or water with the runoffs from all of the waste. That means high-tech, expensive plastic pipes and recovery plants to protect the earth from our discards. Any new landfills should be considered land being sacrificed forever. No good for anybody's use ever. No arguing by anybody that the best way of dealing with solid waste is not to have the item in the first place. If you don't use a styrofoam cup, you don't have to worry about how to dispose of it. It's easy enough for anyone to use this ceramic mug and reuse it at home or at work. If you minimize the amount of material in a product and minimize the amount of toxic material in the product, then you don't have the trouble to begin with. Source reduction, as it's called in the trade, is the best way of dealing with solid waste, followed by recycling, incineration, then landfilling in that order. Recycling, incineration, and landfilling have pluses and minuses, as I have shown, but there is no such thing as a cure-all. It will cost money to deal with this issue no matter what we do. And remember, it will cost a lot more the longer we wait. So here are some simple steps you can take. There are many local stores that sell reusable things, such as the Kappa Swap Shop, Book Market for books, Children's Exchange for baby clothes, and the Computer Trading Post, and many more, such as the Salvation Army. After source reduction, recycling is the next easiest to do. It takes no more effort to throw the paper, magazines, plastic, glass, and metals in these bins as opposed to this trash can. And you're carrying out to the street the same amount of material, whether you recycle or not. Please let the management know your concerns about the recycling potential of products, but do not blame them. They are only responding to what people are buying. So if you need to buy something, buy recycled and get minimal packaging. And if you don't need a paper or plastic bag, say so. And of course, recycle. Reduce the amount of rubbish that needs to go in the back of one of these. Get involved with your local government. See what you can do to cut down on wastes. Remember, each person in Melrose generates around 7 pounds of waste per day, or, looking at it another way, the U.S. society uses 7.5 tons of fuel and 5 tons of minerals, food, and forest products per person per year. These are beaches in Alaska and Hawaii. Yes, trash is even there on areas where no person has put their foot on the ground in at least 100 years, if ever. It is estimated that merchant vessels throw away 4.8 million cans, 450,000 plastic containers, and 300,000 glass jars per day. And recreational boaters throw away 1.5 pounds of waste per person per day. The sad problem is that the sea creatures get caught up in our trash and die. Sea turtles, for example, think that the plastic bags are jellyfish, so they try to eat them. This is the stomach contents from one poor turtle. This is truly a global problem. NASA has to monitor each piece of trash as represented here to try to ensure that satellites, space stations, and of course the shuttle don't hit anything. The shuttle's windshield has to be changed after almost every flight because either a small meteorite or a small piece of space trash, sometimes no bigger than a pea, has hit and cracked it. We must do our part by reducing recycling. It may not seem like much, saving this one soda can, but if everybody in Melrose recycles but one soda can per week, that's $1.5 million per year, which is $72,000 worth of nickels, but 500 years worth of television watching at one house. I said there were two major differences in the waste now as compared to earlier times. One is what we are throwing away is much more deadly. And the other, well, the other is very different. Before, we were saving and reusing to survive, to get ahead. Today, we are saving and reusing to survive as a species. Thank you for watching this program. Oh, great. Makeup. And it would be intolerable. How's that for a word?
There you go.
If I can remember it. You know, at 10 o'clock at night, there's a heck of a lot of traffic. That's enough. You on record? Because the light's blinking. Okay.
Oh, you know what's blinking? Low battery.
Low battery.
All right, let's do this. And in 5, 4,
Take 5.
3, 2.
Thank you, sir.
You're very welcome. What's ND?
I couldn't figure that out.
All right, well, it's off, whatever it is.
Oh, great.
So, oh, actually, are you done?
For here. I'd like to do one more. Here comes another car. Another cart. Can you hear that cart? Pretty loud. Tell me when.
Whenever.
No cart? George E. Waring Jr. in 1890 said, and move on to new things and modern ways.
Remember that woman walking by?
Okay, I'll do it again.
Well, I mean, just about.
Well, I think I screwed up in a couple different ways.
Run away. Go.
George E. Waring Jr. in 1890 said,
Stop. Is that true? She's going right when you
what happened?
try.
Oh. Yeah, he's right here. Is that loud? Better turn it off. We'll buy a sanitary landfill. Okay.
All right, do it one more time for me. Ready?
No?
Tell me when you're ready. Just say take two.
Take two. World War II is usually an economical way. Okay.
Want to do one more?
You tell me.
Do one more.
Back up. Okay. Take four. World War II is usually... You understand the scene?
Yep.
Take five. World War II is usually seen as the high point of recycling. Take two. That was designed to work too long so we would buy more. Like the rest of the country. Wood, clothes, and down here the pine tanks to be burned and then buried. Take three. And that was designed on roads like the rest of the country.
Alright, take this rolling.
Oh, wait a minute, I got to get up to where we're... Okay, here we go. Because of one of the basic... Oh, wait a minute. I've got to do the dip and turn. Well, I've got to... Ready?
1, 2, 3, go.
Because of one of the basic law of physics, the law of conservation of matter, you can only change something into something else, but you can never destroy it. What is? So you want me to back up more?
Yeah, we'll go to the wire. See the wires. Alright, here we go.
Wait a minute.
Let me stop moving first info.
Because of one of the basic laws of physics, the law of conservation of matter, you can only change something into something else, but you can never destroy it.
Stop moving, you're getting close to your head.
So how do you want to do it? You on record? Because the light's blinking. Okay.
Oh, you know what's blinking? Low battery.
Low battery.
Alright, let's do this. And in 5, 4,
Take 5.
3, 2.
Because of one of the basic law of physics, the law... Just watch that sewer. Yeah, I can see the... Just watch the fire hydrant. Fire truck. Let's go. If you don't use the stuff... And you're carrying out to the street the same amount of material, whether you recycle or not. Keeper.
Trash in America, in the U.S. in the late 1980s.
I'm not supposed to be better than what I did?
Well, I didn't know the line.
Obviously, I don't either. That's enough.
Every day we throw away tons of trash that could easily be recycled. Every week in Massachusetts, we throw out almost 1 million newspapers. We use more than 9,000 plastic bottles every minute. But only about 25% of them are recycled. Some people think recycling takes too much time or it's too hard. This is going to be our world soon. Help us take care of it. Recycle. It's one place where a little effort can make a big difference.
So someone comes up to you and says, do you recycle? You know how many acres of Brazilian rainforest can be saved if you just recycled that newspaper? What difference does it make anyway? Heck, you've probably never been to Brazil. Brighton, maybe. And there's no rainforest inside 128, so why should you care? You know why? Because it's the right thing to do. It's like brushing your teeth or eating your vegetables. Well, brushing your teeth. Hey, every little bit helps, and you know it protects the environment. Interested? Call 1-800-CLEAN-UP and recycle. A little effort makes a big difference. So you don't recycle. What's your excuse? Are the bins too heavy? Perhaps there's just too much bending involved, or you think maybe there's not enough trash in the world. I know. Those recycling bins, they're the wrong color. Oh, you might break a nail on one of those plastic milk jugs, or maybe you're waiting for a professional wrestler to endorse recycling. Well, get real. People recycle because it's the right thing to do, and every little bit helps. Interested? Call 1-800-CLEAN-UP and recycle. A little effort makes a big difference. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking too many recycling rules. What do you think this is, the Army? Soldier, take apart that tank! Come on, you're still trying to rip those stupid little rings off bottles, aren't you? And those hours that you spent peeling labels? You could have been watching TV. Hey, that's living in the past, people. If you like rules, read the tax code, but this is recycling. Just drop it in the bin. This isn't brain surgery. Interested? Call 1-800-CLEAN-UP and recycle. A little effort makes a big difference.
Eat your heart out, Martha Stewart. Happy New Year 2003.